Hi, this is the authors of Growing Up Aspen have started a second season podcast called Movie Chat, where we talk with some of our fellow students in the industry and talk about films and all kinds of fun things. Today we are here with Ben Ball, who is an environmental designer, sculpturist, and has did a little stint with movie set designs and worked on The Matrix. So let's catch up with Ben.
Well, let me ask you a question while we got you, Ben. In your projects now, how much of what you do is influenced by the work you did in Hollywood, if
Oh, I
any?
don't know. I don't know. I couldn't. There's no easy answer to that question. Um, I think that the whole model of it is related to Hollywood because it's a similar scale of operation. I think that my also the design and build aspect of it is related to um, some of the smaller productions I worked on in Hollywood where we were, as a night director, as a set designer, I wasn't just responsible for designing it, I was also responsible to building something or at least managing a bunch of builders. So it's related in that sense. For me, that feels like a natural um, uh, waters to swim in, and the space that encompasses both design and building. And also, I think Hollywood is is about making effects. It's about making uh, a visual veneer, which signifies something. And while that's not exactly what I do, um, I the work that I do um, does is about effects, about visual effects to some degree. So um, I want it to be read with a kind of wow and a kind of wow, a gee whiz and a kind of ooh, wow, look at that. So um, they relate in that way. Um, uh, it's a visual uh, versus a kind of structural and kind of spatial uh, uh, goal to some extent. If you would, if you view me through the lens of architecture, then that's certainly more about what I'm doing is something that's more of a veneer. But if you're viewing me versus a set designer, everything that I'm doing, the ideas about structure and about space and about you know real materials, all of that matters to me. So I have a difficult time drawing a direct line between what I did then and what I do now, only to say, that somehow they informed each other. They did in a lot of ways. I couldn't precisely put my finger on it though.
Well, do you feel like what you do now is more, if you go back and did you learn a lot of that in school for architecture, or did was some of it from hands-on in terms of managing a team to build a giant structure in Hollywood,
Yeah,
or was
yeah. I mean, I think my Hollywood skills were really useful for what I do today. In that, you're as a set designer, as an art director, as a production designer, there's not a lot of people between you and the builder. There's not a lot of interference, and you can really need to understand how to get the most out of that team. So I think I developed those skills pretty early.
You kind of are, in the way I see it, in the position when you were working in the film, when you've worked with the film industry, is you've got the director, you've got the art director, and then you've got the person like you who's actually working with the teams producing all the shit. And so in a way, you're sort of the coordinator slash creator. And that's kind of an interesting dynamic. And a lot of, like Chris is saying, what you learn and pick up, I always find I always learn when I'm on job under pressure because you've got
Yeah,
deadlines and things you got to do. So you got to get creative. And all of a sudden you learn tricks doing that.
yeah. I think that the that's true. I used to think that when I started doing film because I wanted to be in a position where I had like power to actually get things executed. I didn't feel like I was getting that working at these like little boutique architecture firms. And some of the film projects I was working on were I, I could have a what felt like a responsibility that was kind of above my weight class, and I could really get into the trenches with the builders, figuring out how to troubleshoot stuff and how to make make the most of the time and resources that we had, and really figure things out and on the fly on the shop floor while we were building it. And I just wouldn't have had that opportunity as an architect and at that time. So I think that those skills, um, it's about communication, and it's about uh, negotiation and compromise and managing expectations and managing people's the team's temperaments that you can't learn that in school. And
Right.
but what people don't recognize all the time is that's actually a kind of a design skill. Like it's sort of if you can't manage that kind of stuff, then you're thrust in a position. You're in a position where you're proposing something that you may have a design, you may have something on paper, but you don't have the skill set that
Execute.
enables you to execute it, to pull it off from a a, a human relations standpoint. So um, sometimes whether you get what you want or what you designed on paper is really dependent upon how you negotiate with your builders and how you work with your builders, and how those relationships, whether they're full of friction, or they're full of there's a good solid relationship there.
Thanks for listening. The authors of Growing Up Aspen would like to thank you, and would like to also thank the Aspen Times and the Aspen Daily News for giving us materials for our book, Growing Up Aspen, Adventures of the Unsupervised, which you can get at twistandturnpress.com and any local bookstore. Thanks.